Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
A correctional officer pleads guilty today in court for selling an inmate marijuana.
The former prime minister defends the tenant at the heart of a controversy involving NAD's board. The owner of Superclub's Breezes calls the Baha Mar deal unfair. Plus, do you know your HIV status?
News is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina McNeil. Topping news tonight, a corrections officer accused of supplying an inmate with dangerous drugs was sentenced to 1 year behind bars today after pleading guilty in the magistrate's court. April Sands was in court and has the details.
45-year-old corrections officer Logan Smith was charged today with possession of dangerous drugs with the intent to supply. According to police reports, officers received information on Wednesday that Smith had a quantity of drugs in his possession. Smith, who has served as an officer for more than 2 decades, was reportedly searched after arriving for duty at the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services. He was found with 6 ounces of suspected marijuana in his possession. As he appeared in court today before Magistrate Janine Weech Gomez, Smith pleaded guilty to the charge. He told the court that he was taking the marijuana to one of the inmates at the Department of Corrections for the price of $300. Police also searched Smith's home, where they found $1,285 they believe were the proceeds of drug sales. However, Smith, who defended himself in court, claimed those funds were collected from an ASU draw account. He said it was a mind-blowing lesson, and now that reality has set in, he realizes it was a stupid decision. Smith said he has served as an officer for over 23 years, and he is the father of 3 boys. Weech Gomez said she took his guilty plea as an honest account, but she cannot dismiss his role as someone who was held at a high level of authority. She sentenced him to 1 year at the Department of Corrections and ordered him to pay a $1,000 fine. Reporting for our news, I'm April Sands.
Well, former Prime Minister Christie is speaking out on the controversy surrounding a Lynden Pinling International Airport tenant and the former board of the NASA Airport Development Company. Christie says he understands that the tenant was treated unfairly, and he's disappointed with how Tourism and Aviation Minister Dionisio de Aguilar handled the situation. Vonique Toot reports.
Former Prime Minister Christie says no matter how enthusiastic members of the Minister administration are over their election victory, it is a misstep to mischaracterize a private business person. He was responding to Tourism and Aviation Minister Dionisio de Aguilar, who told Parliament earlier this month that the board of the NASA Airport Development Company was summarily dismissed after it wrote off $1.2 million of an LPIA tenant's $3.3 million debt on the condition that she pay the remainder of her balance over time and give up one of her stores. Well, Christie says that's not the way it happened.
Mr. McKinney, the chairman, told me they determined that she was the only tenant paying the rent they were charged. They arrived at a settlement that she would pay $800,000 cash, work out terms for the rest. They were satisfied her loan at the Bank of Bahamas was being done. None of this happened in the PLP's time, okay? And the files would have shown this.
Former Deputy Prime Minister Philip Davis has said the tenant was charged 38%, while other tenants were charged 10%. He said the matter was referred to a forensic auditor who made recommendations which the board accepted.
I know the Higgs & Johnson law firm hired Anthony Kiki Baraka's firm to do a forensic audit or to bring resolution to it. I know that my only interest was in being able to protect a black Bahamian woman who, listen now, weren't given that by a PLP government. She bid. There was a request for proposal put out for 4 stores intact. You had to bid on all 4. She got it.
Christie also denied the Aguilar's assertion that the tenant was not allowed to pay rent for 5 years because of well-known connections.
Why would you want to call a businesswoman's name and have the press call her crony, Christie's crony? Christie had her paying no rent for 5 years when she paid over $4.9 million in rent. Okay, and have all of this thing put out there to the country. And why? For private business persons, right, who no reason to do it that way at all. And no matter what level of enthusiasm they had about winning and whatnot, right, it's a misstep to go and mischaracterize or take people's reputation and put it out to the public in that way.
The former prime minister insisted he understands NAD has a business to run and he would never interfere.
I'm a lawyer. I know you don't interfere. I know this company has to make money. I know Bernice Joaquin, who I respect and who I applaud and encourage well and so forth. All I wanted to have happen was fairness.
Former board chairman Anthony McKinney has said, in addition to giving up a store and paying arrears, the tenant was also required to pay $800,000 within 90 days after execution of the deed of settlement. He also denied claims the board was fired, insisting most, if not all, members resigned. Reporting for R News, I'm Vonique Tude.
In other news, the huge tax breaks revealed in those Baha Mar documents unsealed by the government earlier this month did not come as a surprise to the owner of one major resort on the Cable Beach Strip. Superclub's Breeze's owner, John Issa, says governments are known for giving huge developments like Baha Mar greater concessions. Jasmine Brown has more in this report.
The agreement allows for up to 1,200 work permits to be issued to China Construction America. The project was also to benefit from exemptions of value-added tax and import taxes of goods and services for completion. Issa says while the tax breaks aren't exactly shocking, they aren't exactly fair either.
It has always been the policy in the Bahamas to give greater concessions to larger projects.
Jamaican hotelier says it was a much different story when Breezes underwent major renovations. Just a few years ago, they were required to pay certain taxes by the then Ingram administration.
I was discussing it with the then Prime Minister, Mr. Ingram, and I said, but Atlantis doesn't have to pay excise on their imports. He says, well, if you're investing as much as Atlantis, you would get the concessions. No, I don't necessarily agree with that policy. In fact,
Still, Issa is not holding any grudges against Baha Mar, as he says he was happy to see how the project improves the aging Cable Beach Strip. But the history between Breezes and Baha Mar has not always been so rosy. In fact, in 2014, Issa said Baha Mar's filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection by former developer Sarkis Ismailian had left Superclub's Breezes' own plans, which called for a 50% expansion of its 400-room Cable Beach property, in limbo. The plans called for the creation of 300 jobs. Now, with the project up and running, Issa says they are ready to resume those expansion plans.
once the land swap, which should be completed in the next few months.
As for if he shares the same fares as executives at Atlantis, who have said Baha Mar is targeting the same category of visitors, Issa says no. Reporting for R News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Former Minister of State for Legal Affairs Damian Gomez says he's appalled by former Baha Mar developer Sarkis Ismailian's call for the Minister administration to place a moratorium on the completion of the Baha Mar sale. Gomez asserted that Ismailian embarrassed the government and argued that a court-sanctioned sale has occurred and approvals have been made. The former PLP MP said it seems strange that a contributor to the FNM's campaign coffers would ask the government to intervene in the process. However, it is unclear whether Ismailian donated to the FNM's campaign. In a statement on Sunday, Ismailian urged the Minister administration to stop the completion of the sale so that the government and the public can thoroughly assess the extent of the toxicity of these arrangements. And 65 people in the Bahamas died last year from AIDS, with young people leading the way in new cases, according to Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands. He was among hundreds of people getting tested today in Rawson Square at Scotiabank's annual HIV testing day. And as people lined up to find out their status, Sands said more and more Bahamians need to know how HIV/AIDS continues to threaten the Bahamas and the region.
Since 1983, HIV/AIDS has taken a huge toll, not only in the Caribbean in general, but in the Bahamas in particular. We have had almost 15,000 people with HIV/AIDS, and about a third of them have died. We now have just about 8,500 people living with HIV, and we happen to have one of the highest rates of HIV in the world.
The health minister says he was pleased to see so many people show up for free testing, given the stigma attached to HIV and AIDS.
We have these stigmas that we attach to different persons that we need to get rid of. We have some challenges in terms of people being afraid or unwilling, if they find out that they're HIV positive, to get help. Help is not only available, it's free, and it is available throughout the Bahamas.
Scotiabank holds the event every year in observance of Regional HIV Testing Day. Senior Manager of Marketing and Public Relations, Nakira Simonet, says the goal is to get 1,000 people tested.
So we participate in many undertakings throughout the course of every business year, and this HIV Regional Testing Day is significant because in 17 countries throughout the region, we're all banding together to show support and provide that mechanism for people to know their status.
Still to come on our news, a look at the new anti-corruption unit. That and more when our news returns.